let's get started. All right, so this is just a very simple ice cream test that I have set up. So you can see here, we have 6 different samples. We have a couple of different events. So we have a San Francisco event as well as an anonymous link. That's not typical, but I just did it to show you really quickly how that works in the analyses section. And I want to show you a couple of things here. So the first thing I want to show you in the project is, one, I want to show you my surveys. So here I created 2 different surveys. One is my single sample survey, and I'll click on that in a minute. And the other is a demographic survey. And you'll notice that this demographic survey is labeled as a no sample survey, right? So when you're creating the questionnaire in RedJade, I clicked and I said, I want a no sample survey, right? And then within this question, if I click the add questions button, you'll notice that I have a number. I have a number of single select questions. So what's your age? What brand of ice cream do you consume most often? How often do you consume vanilla ice cream? And you'll notice all of these are single select questions. A quick little cheat way to do that is you'll see that these are all circles. Single select questions are circles. In RedJade, multi-select questions are rounded squares. Okay, so it's a quick way to just glance at your questionnaire and make sure that you have everything correct. Okay. The other thing I want to show you, if we jump back 2 spaces to participants and click demographics, you'll notice that I have set up a number of demographics in my data, right? And what this is going to allow me to do is when I get to my analyses section, I am then able to run my data by these demographics. So I will have these available as filters in my data that I can set up, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. But the way you do this, right here, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to delete my ice cream brand most often so you can see how you do this. So I'm just going to click edit category and I'm going to go ahead and delete it, right? Yes, I'm sure. So to create this, I'm going to click the create button. I'm going to call this ice cream brand most often, and we'll just do Tillamook, Breyers, and other. Okay. So I go ahead and I click submit, and now I'm able to edit the mapping. So you'll see there's this blue edit mappings button. I click edit mappings. I can pull it in from my non-sample questionnaire. You'll notice that's the only questionnaire available. I cannot pull this from my sample questionnaire. I click demographics and I look for my question. So I'm going to do, which of the following brands of vanilla ice cream do you consume most often? And I'm going to map Edie's to other, Breyers to Breyers, Tillamook to Tillamook, and then I'm going to map the rest of these others to other. Okay. And we'll click save. So that maps it. Clicking next actually goes back and embeds the data. So you'll see now what happens if I go to participants and click participants again, click demographics again. You'll notice, I have to refresh it, but you'll notice that I'll get my ice cream brand most often here, right? You'll also notice I have gender, and I did not ask gender in my test. So if I go ahead and click on participants here, I can actually click and I can import participants using the name match feature, and I can add additional demographics to my data. Okay, so you can go ahead and do that quickly here, right? And now you have that data. So let's go back. So let's go back here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open my vanilla ice cream questionnaire. And what I want to show you is a couple of things. So while you're setting up your questionnaire, if I click on this overall opinion portion question, if I go over to reporting, you'll see that this reporting type, we have 4 different reporting types, right? So when you're setting up your questionnaire, each question has these reporting options attached to it, right? Now you'll notice that any question out of the RedJade library already has the reporting options set up the way that we believe that people use them most often. You can change them if you want to, but the reporting options have already been pulled in. So a couple of things. If you change the reporting name overrides what is in this box. If you leave the reporting name blank, you're going to get everything from this white box here. Again, if you type over it, that's going to be the new reporting name that exists. The reporting type controls the statistics that are run on the back end, right, in Analyses. So overall opinion and interval questions will run in ANOVA on the means. And I'll explain in a little more detail how we actually run that when we go into Analyses. Categorical and jar scale data will run a Cochrane's Q across the percentages, and then a McNemar's to add your post hoc lettering, okay, afterwards. The other thing you'll see here is that I have overall opinion and jar scales. That is going to allow me to run penalty analysis on my data set as well. So this is an overall opinion question. You're allowed one overall opinion question at a time. The rest of your liking scores would be interval style questions. If I click on vanilla flavor, you'll notice that the reporting type here is jar scale. So that's classified as a jar scale. It's going to automatically allow me to run that penalty analysis. The other cool part here is you'll see here vanilla flavor, I have a reporting type as a jar scale. So I'm going to go ahead and close this really quickly. And I'm going to go to Analyses. Right, so this is the analyses for that data that you just saw. I'm going to actually go in really quickly. I'm going to click on this questions button. And I'm going to go into vanilla flavor, and I'm going to change it from a jar scale to a categorical scale. Right, you'll see my question settings have been updated. If I go into projects and now click back on my questionnaire, you'll notice that my vanilla flavor question has now been changed from reporting type of jar scale to categorical scale. So this is actually a really nice feature. What it's doing is RedJade saying, hey, we're going to overwrite from Analyses back to your questionnaire so that the next time you use this questionnaire in a test, right, because we have that feature where you can pull open any existing questionnaire, we are going to automatically change the reporting type to the type that you wanted when you last looked at this data set. Right, so that's nice. You don't have to go back and forth, and you can write it back and forth to each other here. Right? And so it'll write to each side. Okay, so now let's actually look into our data, right? So one, you'll notice that when you come into the top line analyses, you're going to have your data set, right? So your questionnaire name is on the left-hand side. If you have really long questionnaire names, I suggest that you put the differentiator at the beginning, right? So that you easily know what questionnaire it is without having to float your mouse over the questionnaire name to see what the full name is. You'll see how it pops open right to the lower right-hand side of that hand, right? You'll also see that we calculate a p-value. We calculate it to 2 decimal places, as well as a confidence level, which is just 1 minus. P-value is just 1 minus the confidence level. You'll also see that we give you, you'll see these numbers in blue. This is going to give you the total count of the number of individuals that answered that specific sample for that specific question. And you'll see that the model here is participant plus sample. So we're using both participants and sample as air in this data set, right? You'll also see that I can also control my reporting options by clicking on the table portion here as well, right? We're running a mean score, and we're also running post hoc lettering here. Now you'll notice our p-value is calculated using a GLM. So we run a generalized linear model on the data, and we calculate your p-value, okay? Then you have some options. If I click the little cogwheel here, you have some analysis setting options that you can go through. So we calculate that p-value. Now that calculated p-value in this case is less than my desired alpha of 0.05, right? Now, we also have this post hoc mode here, and I have it set to run always. What that means is that regardless of the return GLM value, I am going to run my post hoc method, right? So I'm going to run that Duncan's regardless of my calculated p-value, whether it's greater than or less than 0.05. Sometimes the post hoc method doesn't quite agree with the GLM value, especially if those are close. So I have my alpha set to 0.05. So if, let's say, my calculated p-value is 0.06, Duncan's could still find a difference, right? So you can run it always. You can run only if significant, which is the least confusing because you'll only see different letters if you actually have a p-value calculated that's less than or equal to that 0.05 menu. Okay, so we have some different options you can do here as well, and you can also set these up as defaults in the admin section. All right, so let's say I change my alpha from 0.05 to 0.2 and click Save Changes. You'll notice that my lettering will actually change here for my data set, right? And so now I used to have, this was A, this was A, B, and now you'll see it's A, B, C, D, E. They're much more split up, right? And so these are done by letters. So in this case, this 7.22 is significantly higher than all of the other scores here. The only three products at parity is this Turkey Hill with a D and an E is at parity to both Tillamook and Graders. Tillamook with a D is significantly higher than Graders. Okay, so that's how you look at the stats testing in RedJade. All right, now I also mentioned that we also run a Cochran's Q on percentages. So this question, or my vanilla question, is set up as a jar scale. So here I'm running a Cochran's Q across the row and calculating a p-value. And then I'm going to run a McNemar's to add my lettering. So for example, these 16% here are higher than both Breyers at 10% and Edie's at 8%. Okay. And remember, I'm running with a p-value of 0.2. All right. And you can change this as well if you want to. If you wanted to run a mean score and look at the mean scores, you can do that here as well. I'm going to now run penalty analysis on my data. So I mentioned that penalty analysis will run automatically on an overall opinion score versus all of your jar scores. So all I have to do is I click this plus button. I'm going to click my analyses type. I'm going to choose penalty, and I'm going to choose my questionnaire, vanilla ice cream. You'll see I have 5 jar questions and 1 overall opinion question, and I click save, and that's going to automatically calculate my penalty analysis for my products. So you'll see here my products are across the top, right? So there's my 5 products. I have my table. So in this case for Edie's, there were 29% of people who said Edie's were not sweet enough. Those people who said it was not sweet enough rated the product a 5.8 on the 9-point scale, which represented a mean drop of 1.7. This weighted score is the penalty score, 1.7 multiplied by the percent. We give that to you in both a bar chart as well as an XY scatter plot, right, with a critical corner. Now, if you want to download this data, you just click this download button here. The data is Microsoft native plots, meaning that you can change the font size, font colors, move it around, and plug and play it into your favorite application. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show here is the ability to filter data. So if I go back to my vanilla ice cream questionnaire, you'll see again, I have 153 people. If I were to click this filter data button, I can add a new filter, right? And so let's say I want heavy ice cream users, right? So I go ahead, I click heavy ice cream users, and I can choose heavy. Now you have other options here. You can actually do, I want heavy ice cream users who are 18 to 44. And you'll see that here I have my 4 demographics automatically set up for me that I showed you from the project page under participants demographics. You'll also see 2 things that exist on every single project you create. There is an event filter, so if you have more than 1 event, you can run your results by event here. You can also automatically look at your data by position. So here, for example, I can look at first position results if I just click position 1. Okay, so from here I click save, and you'll notice that I have in yellow, I have this current filter, heavy ice cream users, who I think I made 18 to 44. You'll see that there are 17 people who fit that category. And you'll notice that my calculated p-value here is 0.65. So I'm not getting any significant difference lettering here as well. Okay. And you can set up as many different filters as you want, and those filters show up in penalty analysis as well. So you'll notice that sweetness not sweet enough among those 17% of people did not have as high of a weighted score in that case as too weak did for vanilla. Okay. And again, you can just click to download this data. So this will download your penalty analysis, this arrow will download your top line analysis, and this arrow will download your custom charts. Okay. Now, you can also decide if you have a panelist that you want to, I'm going to turn off my filter here real quick and go back to none. Let's say you have a participant who you knew was sick, right? Or you knew left early and you don't trust their data. You can actually just click on the participants tab and you can exclude that participant from the data set. Okay? So that makes it really quick and easy. That participant's excluded. You'll notice if I click on my data here, that is going to now show that I have 152 participants. Okay, 151 for Turkey Hill. That's because I deleted one of this person's data sets. And you'll see how I can see that. If I click on these 3 dots up here, right, you'll see I can view edit data. So I click this view edit data button. This page takes a second to load. So from here, what I can do is I can actually edit or delete a person's data. So you'll see, for example, this Willis Lawson actually deleted his Turkey Hill data, and that's why Turkey Hill has 1 less user. The red data sets are ones I have edited, clearly showing people this data set in the past. So if I click on William Kelly and his Ben and Jerry's data, you'll notice that his answer is now like slightly. If I hold it over the flag, it'll show his previous data was like extremely. Okay, so we flag the data and there's a note, and that data is flagged from that point forward. Yes, you can exclude a question from analyses, so I'll show you how to do that. So if you're clicking, so I just showed you participants, you can do the same for questions. If you have a question that you do not want included, you can just click the exclude button and that question will then be excluded from the data set. So for example, if I click here, melt rate is now excluded from the data set. Okay, the data still exists, it is just excluded. If I go back to my top line analysis here, you'll see that melt rate is no longer after texture. Okay. So you can do that as well. Same with samples. So let's say that these were vanilla and chocolate samples and you do not want to look at vanilla and chocolate versus each other. You just want to look at the 3 vanilla samples. You can exclude our 3 chocolate samples. And if we go back to our data set, it's going to rerun the data with only the 3 vanilla products included. Which leads me to another, to where we're going to kind of wrap up here. So when you're creating projects in RedJade, specifically questionnaires, there's something that I always think about when I'm creating a questionnaire, when I'm helping one of our clients. So what I always think about is, what do I want the data to look like when I'm done? And I design my questionnaire from there, right? So let's just take, for example, that vanilla and chocolate example that I just said. Let's say you're doing a 6-product test and you have 3 vanilla ice creams and 3 chocolate ice creams. If you care at all about the statistical difference between the vanilla samples and the chocolate samples, I would create one questionnaire and I would have all 6 of my samples evaluated on that same questionnaire, so that when I get to the analyses section, my data is going to show all 6 of my samples by default in the analyses section. Now from there, what I would do is, if you think about it and you say, there is no way anybody is going to care about my vanilla results versus my chocolate results, I would create 2 separate questionnaires, a vanilla questionnaire and a chocolate questionnaire, and only attach the 3 vanilla samples to the vanilla questionnaire, the 3 chocolate to the chocolate questionnaire. And in Analyses, that's going to have 2 separate questionnaires, one vanilla, one chocolate, with my data sorted into the 3 products already. So by default, my data is automatically exactly how I want, right? So when you're setting up tests, try to think about what you want that data to look like and design your questionnaires from there. Same holds true for preference tests, right? So if you wanted to do a preference after vanilla and preference after chocolate, I would have 2 completely separate questionnaires, one for each. Okay. Now, somebody asked the question, can you extract the penalty analysis plots? So yes, if I just click the down arrow here, this is going to extract all of the penalty analysis results as tables. They are Microsoft native plots. It won't go straight to PowerPoint. You had mentioned something about PowerPoint in your question, but you can take those and paste them into PowerPoint. They are not pictures. They are actual Microsoft graphs, so you can change the font size, the color, anything you want about those, and then plug them right into PowerPoint easily. Okay. Any specific questions that people would like to chat me before I open this up? Actually, let me show you 2 more things. I just looked through my notes. So one is, if you want to download the raw data, you click this big button here, download raw data. You can download the raw data as a JSON file as well. That's not going to mean much to the people on the call, but if you have if you're typically in a bigger company, you have an IT team, they can take that JSON file and automatically extract it to other applications. And we actually have an API that does the same thing, but does it more automated. Again, that's probably not really for most of the people on this call, but if you want an easy way to extract data from RedJade and put it into third-party applications using your IT team to build out what that looks like, reach out to us. We do have an API. Yeah, so somebody's asking about excluding the person who skipped a questionnaire. I did show that, so I can show it again. There's a couple of easy ways to do it. You'll see if I click on vanilla ice cream, if I click this completed questionnaires table, it's actually sorted by the total number of completed questionnaires. So you can see here that Willis Lawson, person 1003, was the person who skipped one of the questionnaires, and that's because I deleted it, but it looks like it skipped anyway. And you can see that person shows up first because they only have 5 questionnaires versus everybody else has 6. So I can actually go into Willis Lawson's data by clicking on participants, and I can exclude Willis Lawson. And you'll now see, instead of Turkey Hill having 151 completes, Turkey Hill, they all have 151 completes because I got rid of Willis Lawson. Okay, so clicking participants, questions, and samples allows you to include or exclude a specific person from the data set. Okay. The cogwheels change your settings, right? So if you want to change settings, you click on those cogwheels there as well. All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop recording and I'm going to unmute everybody. If you have any questions, I will sit here for a few minutes, but people haven't been asking too many questions once we've been releasing. Chris, did you have anything to add before I do that?
No.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and I'm going to unmute